Hello, my name is Sebastian James Rose. I'm a historian of technology and empire, primarily working on the Middle East in the late 19th and early 20th century. This podcast is part of an AHRC-funded project titled Coloniality and Communications, British Telecommunications in Mesopotamia in the early 20th century. So I'm really excited today to be joined by two excellent staff members from PKP Porthcurno, the wonderful Museum of Global Communications and home to an extensive archive in the stunning and remote setting of the Cornish coast. The Head of Collections and Engagement, Charlotte Todd, and Collections Manager, Alan Renton. Thank you for joining me today to speak about your wonderful archive, which I myself had the pleasure of actually visiting in May. So thank you, Charlotte and Alan, and I hope I got your job titles right.
Yes, yes, you did.
Great. So first of all, can you tell me a bit about what PKP is for those who might not be familiar with what you do?
Yeah, shall I go take this one? Yeah, so PK Porthcurno, we're the Museum of Global Communications, and we're basically the museum is based in the building that used to be the Porthcurno Telegraph Station, which at one time was the largest telegraph station in the world and was basically Britain's main station for all communications globally. So the museum started here in 1998. The archive came down here the following year, and that's the Cable and Wireless Archive. And so now we're kind of run a museum that's open to the public, where they can visit the station and the tunnels, have a look. We basically talk about communications from the early days of telegraphy right up to modern day fibre optics and mobile phone communications. And we also have the archive in a separate building that we have researchers coming from all over the world to come and use the archive for various lines of research into telecommunications history.
Brilliant. So how did you both end up actually working for PKP, and can you tell me a bit about your background and how you became interested in telecommunications and the history of telecommunications?
I'll let you start this one because you were here before me.
Oh. I've got a strange background, really. I'm a bit of an academic. I was teaching in higher education for a long time, and I did some research projects which steered me in the direction of heritage management. And I ended up running the Lighthouse Museum in Penzance. Anyway, that's gone. But it's a very important museum, in my own opinion. About the same time, a post was advertised here, and I became really responsible for the museum collections. The person running the archive at that station previously worked for Cable and Wireless in their archive, because the archive had been established some time. The Eastern Telegraph Company even set up a museum as early as the 1920s, so they'd got some really interesting collections that were already interesting museumology. It was interesting stuff. I ended up here because I was very interested in museums. As it is, I've now worked in not every museum. I've worked in a lot of the museums and collections in Cornwall. So that includes tin mines and lighthouses and wherever else, really.
And that's it.
And Charlotte?
My background was actually, I did archaeology as a degree at Cardiff University. Went on a few dig sites. One of them up in Scotland, where on the Outer Hebrides, where the weather was pretty appalling for 4 weeks, and decided, an indoor heritage job might be the way forward. So I then ended up volunteering at the Wordsworth Trust in the Lake District. So I was there for a year, and there was about 15 of us, all kind of early 20s, volunteering to get experience in museum work. From there, I then ended up moving to Exeter and worked at the Royal Albert Memorial Museum as a documentation assistant, and that was helping them with the relocation of all their collections. And then when that contract finished, the post came up here as the collections management assistant then, where I was working with Alan. And that was documenting and cataloguing a lot of the collections. And working with the archive as well as the objects. And yes, almost 17 years later, I'm still here, and I'm still discovering a lot of very interesting stories and items in the archive, which, is just such a fabulous collection of, over 150 years of telecommunication history, and also all the social aspects of that history as well. That it's one of those kind of histories that once you get drawn in, it's very hard not to get very interested in the subject.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I found really interesting when I visited the archive and the museum was that you're really amongst the old cables and the buildings that were actually in use and important to the Eastern Telegraph Company. And telecommunications more generally across the UK and the world. Can you tell me a bit about the history of the archive and what researchers and historians can expect when they visit you?
All right, this is just a personal opinion. I think it's an extremely rich and diverse collection, and I think it's an incredible privilege to work with it. I think its true range is not fully appreciated. I think it's an astonishing overview, not just of colonialism and imperialist attitudes and culture in Britain and the world, but also politically, because of the nature of the relationship between Pender, the main mover of the Eastern Telegraph Company, and government, and that relationship between government and private enterprise right the way through, so that you get the nationalisation of the overland telegraph in 1870, and the same year you get the cable going from here to India. He's a very astute man. The way the company is set up, the way it invests, the way it protects itself, it's a modern story. It really is a groundbreaking story for the way that he was actually operating. So there's a lot of risk involved, a lot of big expenditure involved, but the companies were really well protected in the way that they were set up. That side of it is quite fascinating to me. And then you get, during the wartime years, it's extremely important. Communication is a big deal for any country. And straight after the war, the new Labour government nationalised the company. Thatcher later privatised the company. And then the company was finally sold about 5-10 years ago now, something like that. Split up. But that history, I think, is an absolutely fascinating one because of all the different areas it touches on. It's like history of business. We don't actually go back as far as East India Company, but there are interesting connections all the way through. And we don't know that. We know that Pender was involved in the cotton industry. Doesn't follow that he was involved in nefarious slave trading or anything else. But there was money there somehow. And the whole deal is really interesting. So I think it's a fascinating collection. I think, like I said before, it's because of its changing identity, the way that records have been kept have been quite interesting. So some of that material should be public record. It's not actually in Kew. We've got it. But there are elements of it that are of more than just national importance. I don't know what sort of records you'd find in the House of Commons. Kew doesn't actually have a lot. The London archives have some duplicates of what we have because way back in the 70s, some records were transferred to Guildhall Library. So there's bits and pieces of our collections all over the place. But mostly it's here, and it really is quite a comprehensive collection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's kind of date range for it. We say roughly 1850s. It kind of it begins. So you're looking at the very early beginnings of actual undersea cables being laid, and all the various small telegraph companies that were being set up to lay particular cables, and then you have all of them being kind of amalgamated into what became the Eastern Telegraph Company. So as Alan was saying, there's all this kind of business dealings, various companies being merged with other companies. So you kind of, with the records that we hold in the archive, it's the usual kind of material that you'd expect of a business archive. So it's all the minute books, staff records, financial ledgers. Then we've got all the engineer reports and charts regarding various cable lays and cable repairs. But we also have quite a lot of the social history. So we have, which still gets donated to the collections now. It's where people's fathers, grandfathers worked for either cable and wireless or previous, and they might have photograph albums, diaries, letters. So you actually get those kind of personal stories coming through from the employees, and of course their families, who actually moved around the globe with them when they were transferred between various stations that were run by the company. So it's one of those archives which you can come at from so many different angles, because it's just really captures that kind of 150 years, not just of the business and the telegraph dealings, but that kind of social side, and also, as Alan mentioned, the kind of colonialism that went alongside it as well.
Yeah, and I think, well, my next question was going to be about the types of sources available, but I think you've answered that. So I'll ask a question about Zodiac, because Zodiac was the source that I found most interesting when I came in and was researching that. What is Zodiac for people who don't know, and why might it be of use for researchers?
Yeah, so the Zodiac was an in-house staff newsletter, is how it began life. It was first published in 1906, and it continued to be then published right up to the late 80s. And what's so makes it such an interesting and such an important source is that it's literally the staff of the telegraph companies writing about either their experiences where they're stationed, or it might just actually they're sending in a poem or a story that they've come up with. Also, you've got sketches and drawings. Basically, they were publishing anything that any staff member at any of the stations was sending in. So there was very little kind of control over the content. So you've really got this quite free expression of what actually the telegraph workers at that time, what their lives were like. As you go a bit more forward, you start to then get more photographs appearing, and you get a lot of information about sporting events. Sport was a very important part of the lives of the telegraph workers. It was what the company was keen to keep these young men that they had working for the company, to keep them occupied and not doing things they shouldn't on these rather remote stations where they were. So sport played a really big part in the social life, as well as lots of parties, cocktail parties, fancy dress parties. It was very much the kind of newsletter kind of encapsulated what it was to be part of the kind of that telegraph family almost. And it was something that cable and wireless, when it came into existence, continued that going forward. You were kind of, once you were working with cable and wireless, you were kind of part of that family, and the Zodiac kind of represented that. It's not till a lot later where you can see where the company does get hold of the Zodiac, and suddenly you've got a far more business-minded kind of publication, which is talking about shares and profits and what the business is doing, and less of that staff voice is coming through. But the very early Zodiacs, definitely you just get that kind of voice coming through from the telegraph workers themselves. And a lot of what they're talking about is not, it's not politically correct. There are ways that they express themselves and talk about kind of where they're stationed, which is something that we would not express it in those terms today. So that it is part of that culture, and I'm quite keen that doesn't get hidden or ignored, just that we are aware that it can be quite offensive in its content. But apart from that, it's such a rich source of material. We have a complete full copy here. We almost have another 2 or 3 full copies going right through from 1906 onwards, a few gaps here and there. But as far as I'm aware, no other archive has a full set of the Zodiac covering from 1906 onwards. So anyone wishing to use it, and it does get used a lot by researchers who come here, even if when they come here they've not heard of it or they don't think it's going to be of importance to them. We usually, in chatting with the researchers, say, well, you might actually want to just have a little dive into the Zodiac and just have a look through. And most researchers usually very surprised and impressed by what material there is to be found in it. So it's one of our most important kind of collections in the archive, I would say.
Mm. It's got a lot of staff records in it as well, which is quite useful. So, because a lot of our inquiries, not just academic inquiries, we get a lot of family history researchers and so forth. And it's useful for that because although we've got quite comprehensive staff records, the Zodiac's got a helpful bit every year or so that says, who's where? And it sort of lists all the staff and all the stations. It's not foolproof, I have to say, but it's pretty good.
And another question, a more general one, is why did the Eastern Telegraph Company choose Porthcurno? It's a very remote location. Why did they choose that as their site for landing the cable?
I think you've answered it. It needed to be quite close to the Atlantic approaches. The original proposal that the Falmouth Gibraltar Motor Company was going to be based in Falmouth is, I don't think, true. It's just branding. Everyone knew where Falmouth was. They all knew about the packet service. There was no intention to run a cable out of Falmouth because it would have got snagged by the anchors of all of the ships using the harbour. This place, the beach slopes back quite steeply. I mean, it's shallow for a little bit, and then it drops off quite nicely. So it's an ideal place to actually land a cable. So technically, it was useful. You've got the benefits of being right out into the Atlantic as far as you can go, pretty much. Well, just round the corner at Senham, cables also come ashore. They came ashore here first, mind you, and then up the North Cornwall coast, there are other places where the cables come ashore today.
Is there a source or a set of sources? I know you mentioned the Zodiac, and we talked a bit about them, that you find particularly interesting or you think might need some more attention by researchers?
I would say there's the microfilm project that we've just begun exploring. How many was it? Over 2,000, did I count?
Right.
No, I forgot. I think it's about 2,000 microfilms that we have in the collection, and these cable and wireless at some point, was it around the 70s?
Looks like 70s. Yeah.
Decided that they wanted to basically photograph everything and put it onto microfilm and then destroy the original documents as a space-saving exercise. So these microfilm, we had drawers and drawers of microfilm. Someone had gone through and kind of arranged them into a kind of alphabetical chronology, but nothing further than that. We didn't have many actual written material about actually what's on the microfilm. So you actually have to pick one up and see if someone's actually written on the back of it, but some of them don't actually have anything written on them as to what actually the content is. And it's been something that we've been wanting to start to investigate for a while. So Alan actually took a sample of microfilms to Porthcurno, which used to be the Cornwall Record Office, because they have microfilm readers there. We don't actually have a working microfilm reader. And started having a look. How many did you get through that day? It was
I don't recall.
It was a lot, but
A few. Yeah, I mean, they have separate codes on them. SEC, we think, is company secretary. What are the others we've
personnel,
got?
P&L.
Yeah. Anyway, by looking at the cases, you get some idea of what type of content there might be. What I've ended was just randomly sample different ones. If I could get a date or something, just to see what kind of content there was. And it looks like there may even be a list of contents of other microfilm rolls on some of these microfilms. But we haven't discovered that yet. So that's in the offing. So that, we're quite excited about this. We think this is a whole new body of material that has never been looked at. So there's going to be some interesting stuff in there. And it covers quite a wide range.
It does go back to like 1920s, some of the
material. Yeah, it talks about the early museum.
Yeah, so although it was all copied in the 70s, so far as we can see, but it could go back earlier, it's 1920s onward, and it's such a...
The kind of stuff you've got wartime stuff, talking about staff who are actually working within territorial organisations. You've got a whole load of stuff about the Marconi Wireless Telegraph Company. So that's correspondence between, the way the companies were merged, brokered by government, so that the Marconi Company and the Eastern Telegraph Company were actually operating together as a unit. And that was when INIC was created, and follow on from that, the Cable and Wireless. So there's all that sort of stuff, including directors' reports from 1930s. Then you get stuff about modern stuff, logistical things about purchases that Cable and Wireless made much later on in their history, 1980s. So this is either just up to privatisation or just after privatisation. So that shows a completely different strand of the company, its ideology, its commercial aims, what it thinks it's doing, and the kind of mistakes it might make, you never know. Medical records, chairman's reports, staff files, and some of the stuff we enjoyed most, accident files as well. So we're looking forward to have a good look at some of those. The ones we liked included documents about retention of records and safeguarding records. And various people at various stations were saying, what do you want us to do with the stuff that you don't want back? It says, destroy it. And on the cable ships, it says, oh, just weight it down and chuck it over the side. There's your history.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah.
So we're really looking forward to this.
Yeah.
It could be a load of rubbish, but it doesn't look like it. I mean, we've looked at these rolls for a long time thinking, what are they? Just memorandum, just staff reports, minutes? What could they be? But now we've got a sense of that range. I think it opens up a whole, new research possibilities.
We also weren't sure whether, although the whole idea of them put on microfilm was to get rid of then the originals to create space, and it does say on some of the microfilm there is a letter that states that once these things are photographed and on the microfilm, the originals will be destroyed. So we weren't sure whether that destruction happened or whether we've only got copies on these microfilm and stuff that we actually still have the originals. But at the moment, it's looking like a bit of a mix. There could possibly be some stuff that we still have the originals, but there's also a hell of a lot of stuff we think that is only now exists on these microfilms. And these microfilms are at the moment inaccessible because they're not properly catalogued, so we don't know where to start, and we don't have a microfilm reader here. So there is a huge wealth of information there.
So we've got a project in mind.
Yes, we have a project in mind. Going to the National Archives. We've spoken to them about applying for one of their cataloguing grants, which would hopefully be a 3-year project where we would actually have someone who works their way through the microfilm, starts cataloguing them properly to make them accessible, with the idea of then, possibly in the future digitizing them. But at the moment, it is just getting that access, getting to know what information's on there. So we're quite excited about that. that project anyway.
Great, that sounds wonderful. And then for a final question, I know you just talked about the possibility of a future project, but is there any other projects or things that you'd like to see in the near future with regards to the archive?
I mean, we've done various collaborations kind of over the years. So there was the Connected Cornwall project, that was a HRC funded project, and that was where we worked with a group of academics to again create an exhibition, but also to try and kind of make the material more accessible. We've also had several PhDs that we've worked on, both Leeds University, Exeter, and also now Loughborough as well. And they've looked at various things around material culture, World War II, and Cable and Wireless's work during that period as well. And more recently, we have a PhD that's looking at the environmental impact of the telegraph industry, especially with regards to the gutta percha trees in Malaysia. And that could be that we haven't kind of looked at it from that environmental angle before. So I'm quite interested to see what kind of comes out of that, if the company was aware of their impact, or if that wasn't even a consideration back then. That's going to be quite interesting to see if there was any thoughts around that, or if it was just purely about we want to make as much cable as possible as quickly as possible. But I mean, we've also worked recently with GTHQ as well, collaborated with them on an exhibition. And one of the projects we did a few years ago during COVID actually was our Connected Collections project. And because of COVID, it meant we had to think of a way of working in a much more remote way. And one of the things we did, we had 5 students at Exeter University, and we linked them up with university students at other places around the world, which basically were like the other end of some of the old cables. So we had someone in India, Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and basically they paired up with one of the Exeter students, and then they were given the freedom to kind of interrogate the archive around whatever it was that they were interested in looking at. So, for example, the New Zealand student, they decided they were going to look at landing sites of telegraph cables, and actually that some of them were sacred sites to the Maori people. So she kind of created a kind of online map showing these places and looking at the kind of impact of that. And the pair who were working around India, that was very interesting, because they were looking at how telegraphy was connected with actually the spread of English. And she was looking at that, how you could see how that increased when the telegraph kind of arrived, and the spread of that. So yeah, and we did a online symposium where everyone just kind of presented their research. And it was just really interesting, because they were all coming at it from such different viewpoints, and also some of them, they weren't, their background wasn't history. We had someone who was actually, their background was chemistry, another one who was politics. So again, it was trying to say that this archive can be looked at from so many different angles and different backgrounds as well. And yeah, it was just wonderful to see how, when they were just given free access to follow whatever research, that the outputs that came from that, it was a really good project, and something that I think I would definitely like to try and do something similar again. And I think just this way of linking us up globally, it kind of seems to fit with the history of this place in Porthcurno anyway.
Yeah, and if people want to contact you or find some of this work, where can they go? How can they go about that?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a dedicated email address, which is archive@pkporthcurno.com. We also, if you just go on the PK Porthcurno website, there's a link there. There's a little tab there that's collections, that also give you our contact details. It also takes you to the PK online collection, so anyone can actually search our entire catalogue online. There's about 8,000 digitised photographs on there at the moment. You can also search for names in staff records. You can also search under themes, or we have a map, so you can actually look by location. It'll tell you what records we have for different locations around the world. Or you can just do a simple keyword search and then refine that search, and it will, you'll just be able to actually look through our collections without having to come all the way down here to Porthcurno, which is a long hike for some.
The online collection is quite important. It's only been going 3 or 4 years.
2022.
3.
Yeah, 3 years.
That is really important. It's made a big difference to the way people are contacting us. And I think it enables people to get a feel for what the collections are. Not all the stuff we've got is paper. We've got obsolete video formats. We've got 16mm, 35mm Super 8 film, some of which have been digitised, some hasn't. And like Charlotte said, there's an awful lot of photographs. Not all of those have been scanned yet. Just a research project that whizzed through photographs would be quite an interesting revelation, to be quite honest. And the photographs extend from corporate promotional stuff, handshaking officers, through to buildings and construction at some of the outposts on various islands or coastlines around the world. The range is really, I think that's the thing that's so exciting about it, the range of stuff. And we would like to do something with the film. Some of that's quite important. We intend, haven't done it yet, to track down any overlap with stuff at the BFI in case some of this film is unique. If it's backed up elsewhere, well, less of a panic. But so some of that is corporate promotional stuff, but some of it's wartime or just after the war. So it's the sort of stuff that you'd expect to see. The British documentary film in the 30s and 40s, that's got that feel about it. There's one that's got a bit of Claude Debussy while the cable ship is laying. So you're getting La Mer blasting away whilst the cable ship is chucking the cable over the side. There's some really interesting stuff. It's just a fabulous collection.
Yeah, the oral history recording.
We've got the oral history,
yes,
which have also been digitised. They were digital. Yeah, there's some interesting staff histories, interviews with people who worked mainly abroad, but there are also interviews with people who worked at head office in certain key roles up to early 80s. There's a few odd bits that we didn't record, but that the company promoted. The book's over there somewhere, but it's called Voices from the Past, or Voices Over the Horizon, or Voices from. But it was a company promotional, the corporate promotional thing, really. So Cable and Wireless commissioned this bloke to do interviews with people, ostensibly to produce the book, but we've got the recording, so it's possible to dig a bit deeper than just the text that's in the book. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, Charlotte and Alan. And I hope more and more researchers and people interested in the history of telecommunications come and make a visit to your wonderful archive in Porthcurno.